Hey, in this video for the Pen Wargame Play Easily Now, we're going to be going through how to deploy your units with those custom profiles and what the flow of a basic game looks like. If you haven't seen our other videos in the Pen series, I encourage you to check those out back at our channel and get up to date on how the system works that we've created to allow you to take your LEGO minifigures, 3D printed minis, or gaming miniatures and use them in detailed strategic wargaming that's still easy to get started in. In this video, now that you've built all of your armies out, you're going to have a complete set of balanced forces that are more or less equivalent to your opponents, although they might be different numbers, different shapes, different sizes, and maybe even different themes. Now it's time to deploy them. Depending on the size of the army that you've chosen, you're going to get a predetermined battlefield with two deployment zones, kind of like the one that's shown in this example here. Both players will roll a six-sided dice, and whoever rolls highest will place their unit first. It doesn't matter what unit gets placed first, that's entirely up to you, but you'll place one and then your opponent will place one. And this will continue going back and forth until both players have placed their entire armies. If one player has more units than the other, once they've finished alternating and their opponent's placed all of them, then the one with units left over will just continue placing until all of their units are deployed. If there's not enough room in a deployment zone to place all of your units, maybe you're taking a ton of minions that don't cost very many army points, or you've got a couple really big contraptions or something like that, that's okay. Pen allows you to deploy your units in two waves. So the first time that unit would activate, you must place it into the battlefield, but that allows you to move some of your other units out off of your deployment zone to create room for maybe some of those bigger things. This is really thematic and really tactical because it means that you can wait to deploy some of your more vulnerable vehicles that might take up more space until after your opponent has activated some units. It also allows you to deploy in waves. So maybe if you have, say, an army of battle droids, then you can move those out into the battlefield before you bring in your tanks or your ships. It offers a lot of strategic flexibility and it's really thematically cool, at least in my opinion. While you're placing your units and throughout the game, all of the miniatures in your units have to maintain unit coherence. What this means is all of the miniatures that comprise one unit have to be physically in contact for the entirety of the game, starting from when you put them on the table all the way till game's end. This just means that as long as you're moving them, removing them from the table for damage, or placing them for their initial deployment or any redeployments, their bases have to be physically touching. This is a little bit more particular than some other war games that give you a couple inches of flexibility, but it's much simpler because all you have to do is take a glance at your models and make sure that they're touching. No measuring, no fiddling with the tape, trying to squeeze your way between tiny little figures, none of that. Just make sure that they're touching and you're good to go throughout the rest of the game. Once both of the armies are deployed and all of the units are coherent within themselves, then the game begins. The game begins with the highest agility unit moving first, and in the case of a tie, players will roll off to see who goes first. Units will continue to activate in order of descending agility, so the highest agility going first, although the player who's activating them can choose to save their unit until a later time. Unlike some war games where all of one player's units activate and then all of the other players, Pen Wargame allows you to activate one unit at a time, which offers much more back and forth flexibility and a lot more tactical interactions as you can choose specifically what order you want the different abilities to be interacting in, and you can change that order as you go throughout the game rounds if you want one to affect another and then the other to affect a different one in the next round. If a player does not have agility high enough to match an opponent's unit that hasn't activated yet, then that player just misses the turn until the other player has activated all of their higher agility units. In other words, you can think of this kind of as initiatives if you're familiar with role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons. All of the units with higher initiative will activate before the units with lower initiative, regardless of whose army they're part of. This means that players have to take into consideration the agility of their units. Agility is not just for dodging. It's important if you want your unit to have a high impact on the table because you need to make sure that your unit is activating fast enough to survive your opponent's actions and turns so that they can move on to the battlefield and do whatever it is that you've designed them to do. Once all of the units have activated at least once in the battle round, the round is over. At the center of the battlefield, no matter which battle format you're playing in a pen wargame, there is a central objective. The central objective is a 1-inch by 1-inch circular token, which represents a key attribute of this particular battlefield that you're playing in that's caused your armies to fight over it. After all, it's not a coincidence that you're there. Even if you don't have a whole lot of lore behind your armies, there's some reason that your armies have met to fight over this particular plot of land, and that is the central objective. At the end of the battle round, whichever army has the most models within 3 inches of this central objective controls that objective. There are some game formats where this will get you closer towards winning the game, but in all battle formats, this will give you an extra set of army points that you can use to spend on new units. It's not a lot of army points, but it's enough to deploy at least one basic character with no characteristics for each round that you control it. Alternatively, if you want to save up for more powerful reinforcements, you can bank these army points and spend them at the end of the next battle round if you still control the objective. This allows you to be, again, a little bit tactical in how you're introducing units to the battlefield and the waves with which you are sending your armies out. It also incentivizes players to get into the thick of combat. Although you are playing with a limited number of rounds, which still encourages that proactivity towards the center objective, if you are too cautious and you hold your armies back too far, the opponent will get a lot more fresh units into the fray, which could pose doom for your army. Rounds continue in this format back and forth for 5 battle rounds. At the end of 5 battle rounds, the game is over. If at any point before then all of your models are removed from the table, you automatically lose and it's game over. Alternatively, if you achieve whatever the objective is for the battle format you and your opponent have chosen, you win the game, even if it's before those 5 rounds are over. But if at the end of the 5 rounds, both you and your opponent have armies still left on the table, but neither of you have achieved the objective, you both lose, as your armies churn against each other uselessly in an endless battle of attrition. I hope this gives you a little bit of an idea of how the pen wargame plays out and some of the design decisions that I've made to try and make it as fast, tactical, and strategic as possible without bogging you down in needless measurements or extra decisions. If it sounds interesting to you, make sure that you download the free demo of the pen wargame that's in the description down below, and hit the like and subscribe button so that you can hear more about the design decisions behind the game and for ways you can get involved.